So kia ora koutou, my name is Injy, and I just wanted to start with a message to reflect on. So diplomacy is changing, and I think, gone are the days of faceless suits, turning up at hotel lobbies and everything being behind closed doors. Now, with the internet, we're all actually global ambassadors, whether we realise it or not. And I think as Kiwis, we have particular expertise in this because often, we're the first person that anyone's ever met from New Zealand. And so we're having to espouse, over 1,000 years of rich history in terms of pavlova and rugby and gumboots. And so, it gives us a unique perspective in terms of what it actually is like to be a diplomat, but also what that means in the 21st century. Now, so not only diplomacy is changing, so even from our vantage point in New Zealand, and a beautiful vantage point at that, COVID has changed the world. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about the future of trade and how that's linked. So COVID has driven changes in digitization. It's driven the notion of a global green economic rebuild, but it's also stirred up some really protectionist sentiments in the world, which are important to note because, they're a fact of life. So what I think COVID has actually done is actually brought the future of trade to now. Now, the future of trade and business, in my opinion, is actually linked to sustainable development, and it's about plurilateral relationships. So I'm going to talk a bit about both. So sustainable development is a concept from 40 years ago, but essentially it means, a triple bottom line in terms of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Now we can see this in trade agreements now that have labour chapters, environment chapters, and particularly with New Zealand and Latin America being strong on both suits, it actually creates a great synergy. And we're talking about plurilateral relationships, so those are ones that countries come together as a group, so not a whole group of all the countries and not a bilateral, but it's in the middle, and it's actually about focusing on what countries want to achieve together and making that happen. So I think both those things are key tenets of the future, and both those things, fortunately, are things New Zealand and Latin America do fantastically. But that said, the change from trade being goods and services into shared practices and knowledge has not been without its challenges and its critics. Now, I was mentioning earlier, the very notion of comparative advantage is under threat, but it's key to understanding how these relationships form. And I was saying, especially for the people who were with me in Medellin or knew me then, that to understand comparative advantage, you need to understand the benefits of New Zealand wine and Colombian dancing versus Colombian aguardiente, also known as truth serum, and New Zealand dancing. So together, those really, should shape how important trade is. But that said, we really need to think about how us as young professionals can be part of this future. As part of that, I think, as COVID's shown, we need to be resilient, adaptable, multifaceted in our approach and in terms of responding to opportunities where they lie. And this means harnessing new tools of connectivity that we've got available. Now Zooming has become, familiar in everyone's lexicon, but also language skills. And what COVID has really taught is that the human touch, and which we saw with Jeff hugely, has not ever lost its place. In fact, it's more important now than ever before. And so that is the key role of the Young Professionals Network, is to build those soft skills that you can't learn from university or in workplaces, because it actually takes a community of shared practice, which is what the Young Professionals Network seeks to provide. Now to illustrate what this kind of looks like in practice, I'm just going to speak briefly about my own journey, which the too long didn't read version is known as Mosgiel to Medellin. So it involved, as a 16-year-old, heading up first to Auckland and then over to Rio de Janeiro and to Rio plus 20. And so whilst there, it involved being exposed to a huge amount of diversity, of opinions, of cultures, and really learning the benefit in terms of how to make collaboration on the international stage. So that inspired me to study law, economics, environmental science, and a ton of other random subjects. But like Jeff said, every path in your life actually means something and leads to somewhere else. So it's something that to keep in mind, because at the end of my studies, I was fortunate, as we've all heard, and now I'm in a debt for a drink, to end up in Colombia. And whilst there, so got to build on my experience working down at the Ministry of the Environment in Wellington by actually helping Colombia's largest disaster relief NGO write their environmental policy, which then helps them access UN funds to be able to deliver programs on the ground, but also deliver insights for us back in New Zealand in terms of climate adaptation. So, and then from this, actually be able to build on that, take it to the UN, where I'm working at the moment on Netherlands crazy hours in time. But it's actually really important because you realise the softer skills of actually having worked in different intercultural contexts, how valuable that is throughout your career, and in terms of also the impacts that you can deliver, because New Zealand is well known for punching well above its weight, and so that is the expectation for everyone in this room tonight. Now, turning to the opportunity for the Young Professionals Network. So really, it is the chance to build those kind of soft skills in terms of language and in terms of cultural communication, business harmonization, actually figuring out how to turn things like COVID, economic shocks, as they're black swan events, as they're termed internationally, into opportunities, and particularly so for our two nations which share such a great opportunity for comparative advantages. I was saying agricultural, educational, the list goes on, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it later. So all of this to say, the future of trade is changing, and I invite you all to be part of the Young Professionals Network in leading that. So thank you to the whole team, and thank you to all the work that's been put in, and yeah, I'd like to leave you with that. Thank you.